Let's talk about some of God's latest self-appointed messengers on earth and the internet, tradwives. Now, tradwives are women who believe that God tells them to stay at home and treat their husbands like children when they aren't out being breadwinners. Well, they stay home and pop out babies like ping pong balls. Tradwives provide a happy face to a growing movement of women who believe that the most godly thing to do is participate in their own oppression. Now, don't get me wrong. If women are happy to stay home and that's the lifestyle that they want, awesome. It's the presentation that this is all women are good for that is the problem. Women like me, who get married older, who don't stay home, who talk to my husband like he's an actual person, are assumed to be used up and unhappy because of feminism. And they act like returning to their take on God will free me from these worries. What they actually are advocating for is freeing me from my mind, from my ambitions, from my opinions, from critical thought, and from my identity. And if that's the kind of freedom that the Bible advocates for, then I think I'm good. But if you think I should stay in the kitchen and make tradwife videos instead of upsetting people online with atheism, then call in because the show is starting now.
All right. What a wonderful, wonderful intro. Hello, folks. Thank you for tuning in, theists, atheists, and everybody else. Whoever you are, wherever you are out there, you could be anywhere, but you're here with us. Today is March 17th, 2024. I am your host, Jimmy Jr., and joining me today is the wonderful Sofia Spina. Sofia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty all right, actually. It's a
Excellent.
good day to be an atheist.
Yeah, that was a wonderful, wonderful cold open, and your hair looks wonderful as well. You've done something different.
It's like more reddish, and yeah, it actually looks better on the screen than it does in real life. So, you know, I'm really enjoying this moment because like with tradwives, it's really easy to look better on the screen than it is, you know, to actually show your life. So
yeah. So tradwives, huh? So tell me a little bit about that. What is this thing called tradwives? You and I have spoke about it briefly in the past, but now's the time. We want to get callers on here to let us know what it is they think about women and their religion. So you had a good idea.
I had a good idea. Oh yeah,
tradwives.
My tradwife OnlyFans. That was my. I was sort of joking that I should think about doing that because it would just be so flagrant. But yeah, so tradwives are kind of a growing movement online, and I think that they're one of those movements that's sort of soaking up the controversy that they're creating. But they'll talk about how, like, don't tell the feminists, but I love cooking for my family, which is always interesting because it's like, I mean, so do I, and I'm a godless heathen. So it's this very narrow vision of what traditional gender roles are. That doesn't really date back further than the 1950s, but neither apparently does some of the modern Christian imagination. And so what I'm supposed to do as a wife and mom who is capable of breeding is that I'm supposed to be home. I'm supposed to make everything as simple as possible for my breadwinner husband. I think it doesn't go discussed as often how men are also treated like they're basically infants who can't do anything for themselves in this kind of movement, because you're supposed to make everything perfect, nothing upsetting. It's this very, very strict kind of way of living. And men are just supposed to be coddled unless they're at work. So it also includes the baby voice, the women who talk softly to all of their menfolk because they can't be upset. That kind of the funny baby voice thing comes out a lot with tradwives as well. You're supposed to be a child forever, but a child with boobs who takes care of everything in the house.
Weird.
It is so weird.
Yeah. You know what else is weird? I love cooking for my family too, and I'm not a woman. So
you'd be a great tradwife.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Just
I don't know.
Get you some hair, and then you're all set.
Sophia, you had to stick the knife and twist it, didn't you? Those days are over. All right.
Hey, we're actively inviting people on the show to talk about how I should be in the kitchen and doing like other things. So yeah, I'm sorry.
And not making fun of men's hair. I mean, know your place, will you? No, just kidding.
I know.
Just kidding. No, this is great. I'm so happy to be working with you again. It's been about a month, and we're back. So we have a great show that we're going to be doing today. And I just want to remind everybody that Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. We're a live call-in show, and we have lines open. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. And while we do have lines open, we also have callers. So you better get your calls in before our lines fill up on you and you lose your chance. Before we get to that, though, I do want to take this time to cover our Talk Heathen to Me segment. The question of the week from last week was, let's see, what did we ask? What's something God stole credit for? And here are our top 3 answers. So number 3 goes to Magginsburg 9465. God took credit for fixing a problem that he created. I mean, yeah, Sofia, I don't know how much time you got, but we could probably do a whole season on that, let alone a whole show or a question of the week. So this idea that God gave us sin, right, or created evil, and then punishes us for it, or gave us free will and then punishes us for exercising it. Yeah. Take whatever avenue you want. I mean, how do you argue your way around it? It just doesn't make any sense. I don't know.
I think that one of the biggest arguments that I heard when I was a Christian for it was that God doesn't create sin, but he allowed it. He allowed evil to exist, which to me is kind of like saying, like, I didn't beat up that guy, but I just sort of let it happen, Yeah. And it's this very fine distinction. That tries to absolve God there.
I have to say this too, because this just reminded me of it, and it's like my favorite quote ever. So the great former ACA host Tracy Harris once said, if I had the power, or if I saw a child being abused and I had the power to stop it, I would. And that's the difference between me and your God. And I thought that was so profound. And that I see that everywhere. But that is like one thing people really took away from her work. So yeah, I don't know. God created certainly a lot of problems and likes to take credit for fixing them. But number 2, Blake Walker, 5954. What has God stolen? What has God stolen credit for? Chlamydia. It all started with a burning bush. That is excellent. That is excellent. A little bit gross, a little bit graphic, but thank you very much, Blake Walker. Sophia, what do you think about that one?
I love crude, shocking humor. Like, I mean, I'm going to just make it an Tradwives OnlyFans joke. Like, I think it's great. I have the sense of humor of a 6th grader at most. So good on you.
And if Moses only knew that in like 3,000 to 4,000 years, somebody would be comparing his God to a sexually transmitted disease because of a burning bush, I think he would have made up a completely different story. I don't know.
I mean, it makes me think of all of the different STDs that probably did exist throughout the Bible that we never heard of. So, like, what if Moses actually had chlamydia? Like, it's possible. Yeah. It's possible that, like, I mean, we just wouldn't know. The characters who suffer with infertility in the Bible, did they get an STD somehow? Like, we wouldn't know. Like, but that's one of the possible consequences. So, why didn't God tell us that part of the story?
Yeah, it's possible Moses' chlamydia was so bad that it just drove him into a stupor where he hallucinated and thought he saw a burning bush. Al Capone, the famous gangster, died from chlamydia. It like infected his brain. It was weird. Yeah, I didn't know it could do that.
Chlamydia did what the government could not.
Yeah. Number 1, Shane Wilson, 7994. What did God steal credit for? My ex's orgasms. Wow.
What? All right. Oh, amazing. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
I just feel like I have this insight into their relationship now that I don't know that I needed, but I do also kind of enjoy. Like,
well, I guess he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. So good for him.
I know. Good job.
All right. Well, those are great answers. I really had a fun time reading those. Thanks, folks. The prompt for next week is, what is God's idea of a perfect woman? Enter your best answer below in the video comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. But let me get your answer, Sofia. What do you think God's idea of a perfect woman is?
Well, the God of the Bible would like a blow-up doll, but if I were to pick, it would just be me.
Oh,
realistically. Wow. I mean, why not? Like, I feel like after you leave the church as a lady, you need to work on your confidence. And so just be like, yeah, God's perfect woman is me. Why not? Like,
well, that's good because, you know, you are a married woman. And if you are anything like a trad wife, you'll treat your husband like a god and submit to him. So yeah, you would be his ideal woman, wouldn't you? I mean,
yeah, well, except for the fact that this coffee was made and brought to me by my husband. I did not, missed out on that. So
see, he's not the only man out there that likes to cook and provide for his wife and family. I love that. You know, we belong in the kitchen too. All right. Well, yeah, that's a really good answer. So, like I said, folks, let's get your answers in. We will read them next week. The top 3 answers. What is God's idea of a perfect woman? Perfect woman, excuse me. So, we have some callers on the line. Super excited about that. I want to, before we get started, say thank you to our crew. Can we go to the crew cam, please? And just show all of these hardworking people. Yes. All right. So here they are supporting us. You know, they were on way before the show even started, you know? Oh, hey. So they were on like hours before we even got here. And, you know, they're making this thing work, making it go. And they're going to continue doing a great job throughout the show. We've got an after show that's going to be run by even more contributors to the ACA, making sure that, you know, our mission is upheld and we get to interact with our viewers and fans, if you will. But looking forward to that. So thank you, crew. I want to jump into a call, and I would like to take a call from Michael, him from Tennessee. Michael says that progressive Christians versus right-wing Christians. So he doesn't say that. Let me rephrase. He wants to talk about progressive Christians versus right-wing Christians. And so I am excited to hear that take. Michael, you are on with Jimmy and Sofia. What can we do for you today? Michael? All right. So, Michael, I can't hear you right now. Sofia, can you hear anything?
No, I can't, unfortunately.
Cool. I'm going to return Michael to the queue, and maybe, you know, you can work on whatever that is that's going on. Instead, I have somebody else that I want to talk to. So we have an atheist named Sinaj, and Sinaj is from New York, him, trying to navigate to my Jehovah's Witness relative. Not sure what he means by that, but Sinaj, you are on with Jimmy and Sofia. How can we help you today? All right. So I'm not getting anything from Sinaj either. So
I'm not either. I'm starting to wonder if the problem.
I'm starting to wonder myself. So I am going to return Sinaj and ask Sinaj to hold on, because we're going to get back to you as soon as we get a chance to. But right now, Sofia, you know, I just wanted to kind of talk about this topic that we're discussing. You know, I asked you, hey, what do you want to talk about? I thought it was a good idea what you had. Let's keep it with women and religion, right? We're still in, we're celebrating women's rights, right? And I think
it's Women's History Month.
Exactly, and it's important to kind of get this message out. I think my personal opinion is that, women, you do not have to abide by what these books, what these ancient dogmas tell you. And it's just so frustrating to me that there are some people out there that have been, I think, indoctrinated, to the point that they feel like they're being wrong by being a little bit selfish. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I spend way too much time on the internet. I'm not like fully terminally online, but a little bit. And there was a woman who posted a video the other day. She's a mom. She does cooking content kind of stuff. And she was saying that her children are eating leftovers. Her husband can deal, but she's making something she really wants for dinner tonight, even though none of them like it. And it was enchiladas. And the thing that I mostly thought was, who doesn't like enchiladas?
Yeah, right.
Anyway, and so many of the comments weren't necessarily by religious or irreligious people. Like, I don't know what their affiliation was, but they were talking about how selfish she is and how, well, she should have just made that for her lunches and give everybody else what they want. Like, wait for your divorce because, you're letting your husband starve, apparently. And this was all over her once in a while making a dish she really liked because she thought it was important for moms to remember that you actually get to pick things you like too, and that can be okay. And so even if it's disconnected from religion explicitly, we still have this sort of cultural morass in which we put women in this situation where if they do anything that isn't exactly what this trad wife essentially would be doing, then they're being selfish, then they're being unkind. And we don't hold others to this same standard. Like, the idea of husbands being asked, when's the last time your wife cooked something that she really likes or you cooked for her? That's not nearly as common. Like, I'm fortunate in that I do have a husband who loves to cook and, I get to be the beneficiary of that. But even these ideas pervade so much of our lives that even when something as innocuous as enchiladas, they come up.
Yeah. So we're very much ingrained in like a view of patriarchy. And I'm not sure why that still exists. We have done so much work, I think, as a society, as a species, really, to kind of identify that things don't need to be so divided. A much more egalitarian approach is actually much better for the greater good of society. So when I was studying my master's degree, I did a research paper on gender roles and how religion relates to a nation's economy. Okay. And what I found, thank you. Yeah. What I found was that the more of a female population that is employed in a given country, the better economic standing that country has. So, and those countries that had high female employment were the least religious ones. Right. Or the least orthodox, I should say. So when you have a country like Italy or Spain, these are very orthodox religious countries, but they have very little compared to the United States female employment, and thus their economy is kind of lower on the ladder. Where the United States, we have a large portion of our female workforce employed, and we're a little bit less orthodox, even though we're technically a very religious country. We are very independent minded, right? Like we care about the individual and not about the group, if you will. And so everybody's out there trying to do what's best for them and being a little selfish. And, over the past few decades, we've seen that increase as well to women joining more of the workforce. And that has helped our economy along quite a bit. So I don't know. That was something that I found interesting. We do a study of the most religious countries, and the ones where women are not employed are weakest economically. Saudi Arabia is pretty low economically, although they get a little bit of a boost from their oil industry. And so there are some caveats to that, but most of the religious, super Islamic religious countries have very poor economies and almost, like 20-30% range of women working, as opposed to like 60 to 70 for the United States and other Western countries. So I just thought that was interesting.
I wonder if things like the tradwife movement also, like, as you mentioned, that this, recently we've had more of an uptick in women going to work after, I know the pandemic really hit women harder employment wise than it did men because they ended up staying home. But I wonder if the tradwife thing is sort of a reaction to that, this idea that more women are working. And so as in this paradigm, if you're speaking from like a tradwife perspective, you would see that as part of the destruction of the family, and that women aren't in the home and that's going to disadvantage children. And, it kind of goes around like that. So it's interesting to see these sort of anti-feminist movements arise when you end up with women progressing further into politics or into the job market,
Yeah. So I think that's a valid claim, or a valid point rather. I think even in our own country, we've kind of seen a turn toward conservatism recently, and there is this idea that maybe the country is going in a direction that the other half of the country doesn't want to go in, and it's kind of caused them to be more boisterous and speak out louder and grasp on to these beliefs even harder. And that, I think, has been pretty typical over the last, I don't know, 8 to 10 years in our own country. But I go ahead.
I think with social movements, it's very much like the laws of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Yeah. And so when we talk about things like moving forward in a more progressive direction, there's always going to be a backlash. I think it's hard to watch sometimes because the more we pull one direction, the more divisive the backlash can be. And when we talk about the issues we have, like within families, about political or religious divides now being really dramatic, those can be extremely difficult. But I think there's maybe some hope in realizing that we've been through this a lot before. Whenever there's a movement, there's a pullback. And still, as a country and as people, we survive.
Well, that's an excellent segue. I'm glad we had this little chat because we are going to get back to our callers and take Michael, who is a theist from Tennessee, who wants to talk about progressive versus right-wing Christians. And so without further ado, we are putting Michael on. Michael, you are on with Jimmy and Sofia. How can we help you today? Yeah, Michael, I'm sorry, man. We are not getting you. We are still not getting you. So you know what? I am going to return you back to the queue. We have to figure this thing out. But in the meantime, we've got some screenshots and some other content that we want to get to. And so what I want to do is ask the crew to prepare to load some of our content that we have. And I want to start with, if we can, crew, can we play the voicemail? Can we play the most recent voicemail from this week?
You don't have the Holy Spirit of Jesus enough to protect you. You've got it in your belly, but that can be removed and will be removed if you take the Omni. When Jesus says, I do not know you, it will be removed from you. And in that way, Jesus shall kill you when he removes that pearl of great wealth in your belly. That's the only part of you that Satan couldn't touch. The rest of your minds are, even to now, this day, still corrupted, more subtly, but by that same voice that said, in your thoughts, I will turn and toss you violently like a ball, and don't tell the vision. So no, you do not have a free thought. As a matter of fact, you know that I speak from Jesus. That's why you block me from speaking on your show, on your rail to the Omni. You might want to get you some matching white blue berets when the Leviathan, China, comes knocking on your door. That way you can pretend you're a Buddhist.
Whoa. Sorry, the China part came out of nowhere.
Yeah. I was always taught you never get to the conclusion and introduce new information. I mean, he was talking about how horrible we were, but then we have to answer to China. I don't know how that matters. Yeah. But the Holy Spirit. So we don't have it, but we may have it in our belly. We may have it in.
Yeah, the best I can make out what he's saying is that, like, the Holy Spirit is life force, and how you die is the final removal of the Holy Spirit because Jesus didn't know you somehow. So, like, that's the animating force of life, I guess, is his theory. There's zero substantiation for anything like that in the Bible, I feel like. I mean, unless I'm wildly missing it, I cannot come up with anything. So it really sounds like he sort of invented this thing to tell us about our Holy Spirit bellies.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about as far as we should get us some matching blue and whites. Man, a lot going on there. It's really unfortunate, because this would have been a perfect opportunity for him to call in and explain exactly, like what it is he believes, why we should care, and what he's talking about. Because I can't really decipher a whole lot from that voicemail, and if he could just call and I would have it right out of the horse's mouth and we'd be able to get down to the bottom of things. But instead, he kind of sounds foolish. And I mean, Christians, is this the best you can do? Is that who you're going to let speak for you? You're going to let that person kind of step up and defend your faith by talking about Jesus in our belly and dealing with China? I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like this is an instance in which somebody spends a lot of time in their own head and with people who agree with them. And so then they go to say it out loud and no one who isn't already part of that can really follow it. Yeah, so I would test run these ideas.
Yeah, really. Get somebody to kind of bounce your ideas off of. But without further ado, I hear third time is the charm in some situations.
We're going to do it.
And Michael from Tennessee, we're pulling you back up. I'm hitting the talk button, and I literally am looking at you in my conversation. So, Michael, tell me that you can hear us. Yes.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Michael, you know what happened?
Nice. All right. I'm sorry.
Maybe God is real, and he was trying to, interrupt our show. But I don't know. It seems like we got through it. I'm just kidding. Michael,
awesome.
What's up, man? Thanks for your patience. How can we help you?
Yeah. So I've listened. I actually stumbled on to y'all's podcast just recently, and I've listened to some other discussions like this. And something that's always kind of struck me and frustratingly is that when Christians seem to come on these shows or any shows, they're usually what we might call the right-wing Christians. And they're the ones who are trying to argue that there is proof for God in some sort of way. And, of course, you guys are often arguing there is not proof for God. But there's this whole other section of Christianity, of this belief that might be called the progressive or the progressive left or any number of things like that don't interpret the gospel the same way and come at it at a very different way. And I don't feel like that voice is really ever being heard. So, of course, people think Christians are, frankly, a little nutty because they come from that right-wing side that might more accurately be described as a little bit more legalistic in their interpretation, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and I'd just like to offer that there is a whole nother way of looking at it.
Okay, well, I want to and Michael, I really appreciate you calling in, and I'm not trying to I don't want to suppress what you're saying, but I'm gonna stave off from calling right-wing people nutty. I don't want to characterize everybody that way. I think people that have conservative views, might have valid reasons for some of their views, and maybe they're not nutty. But I can tell you that I've taken some nutty calls. And so there I can agree with you. But I agree. I mean, there is an untapped kind of opinion, I think, or point of view from people who consider themselves more left, more liberal, that don't often speak out about their Christianity. And I think that conservatives are often given the title of, Christian, or Christians are pigeonholed to being conservative, but there is a large population of liberals and progressives that are very much Christian. I'm in New York City, and I am in a very liberal city where there is Christianity everywhere. So it shouldn't be assigned to kind of one group, if you will, or another. But it is very much all across the board, touches all kinds of people. But yeah, there are different perspectives. So what is the perspective that you wanted to put forth? What do you have to say that's different from some of these quote unquote nutty callers you might hear us take?
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, I apologize for that. I certainly actually have a respect for most of some of the right-wing side people. It's just the ones that are, like you said, you take some callers they say some things that you go, hang on, that doesn't make any sense. And it's because they're trying to argue logically something they're trying to argue it like a scientist would, and you can't do that with faith. It really, for me, I was agnostic until I was 21. It happened in college for me where I went to, I just kind of got an itching to understand a little bit more. My campus minister was very much into astronomy, and we talked about science a lot. And what I discovered in that environment was a group of people who were very much dedicated to one another, loved each other, supported each other, a great deal of compassion. Did not matter who you were, what walk of life, or how strange or different, or how much you thought that you were on the outskirts of our society, of our culture. You were welcome in our place, and that kind of devotion and love and support, I saw how that lifted us up and made us better people. And I don't think anybody would deny that that's possible. We attribute that to the presence of God. And it's, it's not necessarily because of evidence, it's because of a feeling that we got.
Well, I understand that.
And I don't think that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't. Go ahead.
I want to ask you something. Okay. So, in with respect to the topic of today's show, Sophia and I, we wanted to talk about women in religion. And I want to know what you have to say about women should keep silent in churches. They are not permitted to speak, but should be in submission. So that's 1 Corinthians 14, 34 through 35. And so I get it. A loving and accepting sect or point of view when it comes to Christianity is what you represent. But how do you reconcile this newfound view with commands from essentially your God or your deity or the people interpreting his commands, saying that women are unequal to men?
The way that we reconcile that is by recognizing that fallible people were trying their best to interpret God's message within the context of their times. And the context of their times, frankly, were pretty sexist. And there are certain things where you read it and go, yeah, when Paul wrote that, I mean, Paul has a reputation among progressive Christians as being fairly misogynistic in a number of times. And there's a lot of problems with some of the things that he wrote. But what was he really trying to get after with the whole of that book is really what we focus more on. I can't speak specifically to that, and that's a whole nother thing, but that's how we reconcile some of those things. When you read it and go, that's just crazy what he's writing. I mean, there's tons of things like that. It says that, women should stay silent. Our whole concept is that we want to empower people to be their very best at whoever they were, at the person that God created them to be. If we're willing to allow our women to, I shouldn't say it that way. That sounds terrible. I apologize.
I'll tell you what. I
get what you mean.
I think we understand what you're trying to say, and I want to bring Sophia in to comment so far on what you've had to say.
Yeah, so I have a few different thoughts. Some I'm sure you'd like, some probably not as much. When I think of, I really, first of all, appreciate actually looking at the Bible within context. That's cool, because you're right. Those were very misogynistic times, oftentimes, in which these were said. And I used to be evangelical. I led Bible studies, and then I sort of became a more liberal or progressive Christian for a while. But I took a lot of theology classes. I did a lot of I love contextual criticism, biblical exegesis, that sort of thing. And the more I got into the root of things like what Paul would say or what the Bible was in fact saying, the more it did feel like, oh, it actually is really trying to say what it means here. It is really trying to, it doesn't shy away from the sexism within it, even if we can look back and say that was contextual. And so for me, it became about, I guess, if we want to just sort of take the vibe of the good parts of Christianity, then we can say that it can be more all around supportive of women, but we have to leave the Bible pretty far behind to do that. And I eventually was like, well, if I'm doing that, what's the point if I'm already kind of not really believing the Bible and taking it at face value? Or the more I get into these stories and get to what they are really saying, it still seems pretty sexist. It still seems pretty rough. Am I just leaving the Bible behind and taking God, or taking the parts that I like? How do you respond to that kind of feeling of when you're sort of able to pick and choose the parts that make you feel like it fits into the faith that you have?
Well, that's a completely fair question. And we have, everybody that I went to seminary with, we struggle with that very thing. And to be clear, lots of women in my seminary, my two best friends were pastors. That's why I moved to Knoxville with them. They came up here and I came up here with them so they could be pastors. What I would probably say is that I feel like when you are doing that, you're also reducing the gospel and the majesty of the gospel, the beauty of the gospel, to these few things that are that are sexist, and you're focusing on that as opposed to what even Paul, what he was trying to accomplish, ultimately doing it in a fallible way, but ultimately what he was trying to accomplish, which was to lift up these churches and encourage them to be a community that loved and supported each other. I don't agree with a couple of the ways that he said to do it, but for the most part, I do. So there's that larger context that I believe very much in.
Yeah, I think once I stopped reading with the pre-assumption that you kind of had, because I did come with it thinking, okay, but in general, this is good, right? And I believe in a good God, so the fallible human thing, maybe they messed it up a little bit, but on the whole, when I left that assumption behind, it didn't look nearly like the beautiful message I had believed that it was when I started reading it for just more like an at surface value thing. So it's interesting because I was so... Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
If I may, I do want to offer one other small thing that just occurred to me along those lines. To kind of illustrate the issue that we have with Paul, you have the Pauline literature, and then you have the Gospels, the four Gospels. And I actually read a thing once that I thought was really beautifully worded that said that we needed to start, progressive Christians, all Christians, needed to start viewing Paul through the lens of the Gospels and not view the Gospels through the lens of Paul. And basically that's saying that Paul was flawed and we need to stop kind of focusing on his interpretation of everything, but rather see his interpretation through the love and grace of Christ rather than the other way around.
Well, you're giving
theologically, that's very profound.
Yeah, well, I think you're giving a pretty horrible person a pass, right? I mean, you said that Paul has a lot of things that he talks about that you disagree with. He was misogynistic. He was horrible to people, horrible to women. And, he did a lot of horrible things, but because he agrees with the things that you agree with, and forgive me, I'm not trying to sound like I'm attacking you, but let me paraphrase. Let me generalize here.
No, it's good conversation.
It seems to me like, well, you know what? I don't like most of the things or some of the things that Paul did. He really doesn't deserve to get a pass for these atrocities, right? But he's saying something I like, so I'm just going to forget about those other things and consider him credible in this one area. But you got to take the whole person at face value here. Why should we believe Paul or give any kind of credence to Paul? And in the same respect, I would ask you, why should we give credence to the Bible when it lists all of the atrocities that it has, right? Whether it comes down to Abraham forcing his servant to have his child, or Lot, offering his two daughters to a mob of people for them to do whatever they want. We're talking about women here, but it doesn't just stop with women. I mean, there are all kinds of atrocities, committing genocide, keeping the young virgins for yourselves, but murder all the women who have known a man, right? Or God destroying the entire planet, killing hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people. Why do I have to accept some of the Bible when it's based on this really outdated, but also far-reaching, in terms of history, something that goes back and just atrocity after hate, after genocide, one by one, is this message that you're talking about, this good message, is resting on a foundation of hatred. That's the way that I see it. And now, why should I give Paul a pass, or why should I give the rest of the Bible a pass just because it's got a few good things in it?
That's completely okay question to ask. Here's what I'm going to say. I hope I can remember the three of them now of everything that you said, how I wanted to respond. First of all, I don't think that after Paul became a Christian, I don't consider him as doing these atrocious things. I think that it's a terrible view how much he wanted to demean women, and the fact that he seemed to support slavery because he didn't denounce it in another one of his books there. But he is a product of his time and the views of those times, which were atrocious. So what I look at is not those specific things where I sit there and go, you are flawed because of this. I look at what is the ultimate point that he's trying to get with all of this, and he's just doing it in a bad way. So I think that you're justified in that question, but I'm going to say that he was a product of his times, and I have to read the Bible in a certain way. Here's the thing, which leads me to my second point. I feel when you talk like that, and again, in the same way, all due respect, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just trying to illustrate this. Hopefully I'm hitting on something. I feel like you're doing the very same thing that you get frustrated when other Christians call in and do, which is that you're taking everything very literally. You're saying,
well, hold on. All right.
Therefore they did this, and you know what I mean?
I want to address,
maybe that's not fair, but
point one. I want to address point one first. Okay. God, if God is the moral superiority in our universe, right, then he owes us better than just saying, well, you know what, this is how things happened between 1500 and 2000 BCE. So we're just going to let it slide. Slavery was always wrong, right? Slavery is wrong now, and theoretically it should have been always wrong, especially in the eyes of God, but God did nothing to stop that. The rape of or sexual assault, I should say, hate that R word. Forgive me, they're probably going to bleep that out. But the sexual assault of women or young girls, that's always wrong, right? At least it should have been in the eyes of God, but he let that slide. There are so many things where you can point to, well, that was just the way that they did things back then. Well, that's fine, but that doesn't offer it any kind of majesty that you're talking about. That doesn't give it any kind of credibility. You know, if this is the all-powerful, all-kind God, all-loving God, then he owes us better than genocide. He owes us better than, some of the things that I just talked about. And by the way, you had to, when you talk about Paul, when he turned to Christianity. But what about before that? I mean, Paul was awful before that, and I get it. That message goes to show you, well, even God does good works through people who are considered lost, and you're never kind of out of the way of God, and there's always a chance, this and that, and Christianity should be I mean, that kind of thing would attract somebody.
Particular statement there.
But what I want to say is that one second. You can't just say that's the way things were done back then. God should have known better. We deserve better if this is our moral our moral compass. But go ahead.
So the way in which you are setting up the nature of God, I'm not going to be able to get a whole lot into this. I don't understand it well enough to explain it all. I know, the basics of what I feel, but is the same way that the right-wing Christians who call in would set up that nature of God. We don't really view it that way. And the fact that Paul was a horrible person before, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but something to the effect that we can't ignore that. The whole premise and what I get when I read the gospel is that we're all pretty bad people periodically.
Oh, we're not. I'm not a bad person.
Rape. Yeah. But no, well, here's what I'm getting at is that I interpret that a little bit differently than you may have. Generally speaking, not always, there's a time for certain selfish behavior, but most of what we would call sin is usually when you're trying to serve yourself as opposed to serving others and helping others and lifting others up. And that is really what it comes down to is that once we, I'm not going to say are saved because I believe that happens 2,000 years ago. It's not something we do. But once we kind of acknowledge that, we try to move toward this idea of being less selfish and more interested in serving one another, serving humanity.
So I have
towards our fellow man.
Jimmy, you want to go and then
go ahead, Sophia, please.
I'm getting some hard, I guess in therapy speak, countertransference here with you, because I have made these exact arguments. And when I was looking at it, I realized how much I was straining to reinterpret the Bible to fit what I thought were the good parts of it. And when I finally gave myself permission to not have to justify my belief all the time and actually look at the Bible for what it was fully, first of all, it's a tremendous relief intellectually to not have to do kind of mental gymnastics to make all the Bible work out in a way that is actually positive seeming. But I realized for myself, if I was picking and choosing the Bible this much, why pick the Bible at all? And I think so. I hear a lot of things that I have said, even when it comes to the character of God and things like that. Like, well, I'm not sure about that, but here's this positive thing I take from it. And I absolutely believe that you can take positive things from the Bible. But for me, it lost the feeling of majesty as soon as I felt I didn't have to defend the feeling of majesty anymore. On that, I have 2 recommendations for you, if you're open to that. I don't know.
Sure.
Maybe. Okay. One is a song actually called Sympathy for Paul by Derek Webb, who is I think, left-leaning Christian. And it's sort of about like, what would Paul think of his role in the church today? And I would be really curious to know what you think of that song, because I thought it was actually really interesting and pleasant to listen to. It's just a good song. And the other thing, I know that we don't have like a book club for callers, but I'm so curious to know what you would think of this. It's a book I have called White Too Long. And it's by Robert P. Jones. He is a more liberal Christian, and he's writing about the legacy of white supremacy in American Christianity. And he talks a lot in the chapter Theology of white supremacy about the habit of picking and choosing the Bible that people did to affirm what they were doing, and how the modern church does the same thing. And so I would be really curious to know like what you think of that, and how you would draw a distinction between picking and choosing in a way that is positive and doing it in this sort of negative way. Or is it just that we're a more enlightened culture now? So I would really love to know what you think of that, actually. I'm throwing that out there.
Can you give me those 2 names again, ma'am? Can you give me those 2 names again?
Oh, ma'am, I love it. Yeah, Sympathy for Paul by Derek Webb is the song. And then I'm going to say White Too Long by Robert P. Jones.
So Matthew, you could always go back to and scroll back and see what we talked about. I just want to kind of summarize everything that we've covered so far. You wanted to call in and give us a perspective of somebody that was a little bit more liberal, not maybe the more stereotypical right-wing evangelical Christian. And I get it. You think that, or I'm not going to say you think, you are attesting that the more liberal Christians, at least the point of view that you take is that you really need to kind of focus on the good parts of what is coming out of Christianity, the overall message, and really the idea is to work toward other people and not just be selfish, right? So I really appreciate that perspective. I want to say that while I don't see much of a difference, right, between that message and the message that any other Christian would give me. I do really appreciate the way that you came in, honestly, spoke with us, and had a mature conversation and didn't yell and scream and do some of the things that you don't like hearing from other Christians, right? Which may be what prompted you to call in the first place. But my problem is this, Matthew. It's that where do you decide what is good in the Bible and what is not? What is going to help your message and what is going to diminish it? If we all stuck to the Bible, we would end up in prison for the things that the Bible tells us to do, or maybe even worse, right? Especially women. Women would be stoned to death for being married and then being found out that they weren't a virgin when they were married, right? Men, that doesn't happen to men, right? So there are some double standards there. But if we were to follow the Bible, it wouldn't be a good thing for us. So how do we decide what's going to be good, what's going to be bad? And do the bad things not discredit the good things? I think that they do. I think the bad things very much discredit the entire message. But more importantly, with all of the disagreements that Christians have, not only with with atheists, but also with other theists, also between themselves, I think God owes us an explanation, and we're just not getting that. And so we have to have these conversations, and we're happy to have them. Matthew, I really appreciate your call. I thought this was incredibly productive. I really liked your perspective, and I'm going to ask you to call back in the future. I think this was wonderful, but we are going to move on to some other callers. So yeah, that's going to do it for Matthew from Tennessee. Thank you so much. Sophia, any parting shots there?
I mean, just that it really reminds me so much of me. Like, I was this person. And I don't look back and say, like, it was bad that I was that person then. I think it was part of my overall evolution into what I believe now. But it's almost hard to listen to someone strain the same way to make these arguments and to stay attached. And maybe he doesn't experience it like that. Maybe that's just how I experienced it at the time. But I didn't even really realize it until looking back, how hard I was working to make these things make sense. I think it's also, a lot of the people in my life are still Christian, most by far. And many of them are progressive Christians, I suppose you'd say. And my frustration with them sometimes is that they're very willing to tell me that other Christians aren't like them or that they're different, but they're less willing to tell other Christians that. And so when I look at it, I'm like, if you don't want Christianity to be that, and I have no idea if this is what Michael does or not. Maybe he totally stands up to people in this way, but you can't just tell me about it. You have to go talk to other Christians about this. This is your fight. And it's not really with me. If you think they're corrupting the message of your God, they're the ones you need to tell, not me. So it is interesting. I guess it brought up a lot for me, this particular call.
You know, I want to say sorry to Michael. I think I called him Matthew about 3 or 4 times. Maybe it's because he brought up the Gospels and I was just, fixated on talking about Matthew, but I don't know. Michael, thank you. If you're still watching, thank you very much.
For your patience.
Yes.
Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, he was great. And I truly do apologize for giving you the wrong name. I hate that. But anyway, Sophia, we are at the time where we are going to read off the top 5 patrons. Do you want to take this one?
Sure. All right. We have patrons. Everyone should sign up to be one. They're amazing. Our top 5 patrons are Dingleberry Jackson, because of course, Oops, All Singularity, Dark Wolfie Games. I think that's a new one to me. I love that. Dark Wolfie Games. Yep. Davor Valjean. And okay, I never say this one correctly, so sorry about that. You might need to help me. Calevi Helvetii. Calevi Helvetii. I think if you put it in an Italian accent, it must be easier or something.
Oh,
to get
that was
one
Italian?
Out.
That was supposed to be Irish. Man,
it was like
terrible.
Super Mario Italian, maybe. So that's where I went with it. Yeah, and then honorable mention to Russell Jensen. Thank you for having an easy name to say.
Heck yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for contributing to us on Patreon. Folks, we have the Patreon platform as well. You should go on, get a membership. You can access all of our content. You can send us some messages. And we do have or some donations or whatever. We do have other Patreon exclusive content coming up too as well. So you might want to check that out. But yeah, Dark Wolfie Games. Spoken to Dark Wolfie Games in the Discord several times, but it looks like he knocked out Left in the Leaves. I'm going to shout out Left in the Leaves because Left in the Leaves has been on consistently for 4 months, but seems like he dropped off. So, or she, or they. Anyway, we are going to move to a different caller, and we have Mattias, I think I'm saying that right, in California. Him wants to respectfully present evidence for God. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Mattias, you are on with Jimmy and Sophia. How can we help you?
Hello.
Hey.
I'm Mattias. Yeah, I'm Mattias. I am from Victorville. I'm calling in on an adult institution, right? I'm not a program, right? We can say whatever we want freely.
I'm going to ask you to just be professional and respectful, but I would like to know what your evidence for God is.
For sure. My evidence for God, I think maybe you got this before, but I think it's in the sun and moon. Whenever you look outside, don't you see God's beauty at work?
No.
Sorry,
No,
man.
I don't. Sophia, why don't you kick it off?
I think, again, when I was a Christian, I would read God into nature. I would read God into everything. And once I stopped putting myself in that mindset, I was able to be in awe of the world as it is without it needing to have some extraterrestrial meaning. I'm looking outside right now and I see like beautiful trees swaying and, kind of the foggy sky, which I love. But I see weather patterns that I'm able to make meaning out of. I don't see God there. I know it's something that I'm putting into it, but it doesn't diminish it for me. I just do not see this as self-evident, as like evidence for God.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
Mattias, I just want to throw on there. Okay, we have a sun and we have a moon, right? Why should we equate that with a deity when we know that the story of, and I'm going to assume, are you a Christian? I'm making an assumption.
Christian. I'm Christian.
Okay. So the very basis for the creation of the universe, or the creation of our solar system, at least in the in the Old Testament, in Genesis, said that the sun and the moon were contained inside of a dome. Well, we know that that's not true, right? So now that story completely falls apart. Why should I give any credit to God being associated with the sun and the moon?
Because if God makes everything, right? That's what we believe. And so if God makes like the sun and the moon, then he also brings on every other disease. And that doesn't mean
that's a huge leap though. So I will grant you one thing. Okay. Let's assume God creates the sun and the moon. How does that mean that he creates everything else? What if he's a God that just creates suns and moons? How do you go from God created sun and moon, so that must mean he creates everything else? Okay. So now explain to me how you know that he created anything.
Well, first of all, if he made sun and moons, then he'd be an Aztec. Second of all, I think that like our God, right? The Christian God makes everything, right? It's not, I guess, using the sun and moon was a bad example, right? But I mean, if you just walk outside your yard, and if you look at all these miracles online, then you believe
miracles online. Well, hold on. Yeah. I don't want to get too far. I know that you have something else you want to add, but we need to kind of address a couple things. All right. So you say that God creates sun and the moon. We have no proof of that. We have absolutely no proof of that. And the account that we do have is incorrect. We know that the mechanics of how the universe and the solar system are set up do not fit the story that we were given by the founders of your religion, right? Then you claim that because God can do one thing, he can do another. Well, how do you prove that? So now I'm asking you to take a second step, right? So first, we can't really prove the first step, but let's just grant it to you. So now how does he create everything? I mean, you didn't give me an answer on that. How do you know that makes sense, And it's okay to say we don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people are really uncomfortable saying, well, I don't know how that happens, therefore God. But really, it's okay to say we don't know. We don't know a lot of things, and maybe we never will. So there's two things right there. But I also want to ask you, about your God, the Christian God. What is the name of your God? Do you know what that is?
Yahweh.
I
think that.
Yahweh. So is there another name for your God besides Yahweh?
Jesus.
Okay. All right. So Yahweh. What if I told you that Yahweh was not the Judeo-Christian God that you think it was, and it actually is older than Judaism, and it comes from a different part of the planet? Would you believe me?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I did not know that. Pentecostalism and whatnot. I'm learning something new every day.
Hey, but that's what we're here for, man. I appreciate that you feel that way. Look, I want to tell you something. So Yahweh, the name Yahweh comes from ancient Mesopotamia, right? We're talking 2000 BCE. Okay. So that's like 5,000 years ago now, but earlier than that. And Yahweh was the God of rain and the God of storms. Okay. So a group apparently, and you can match this up with the story of Abraham, traveled to the Eastern Mediterranean in what is called the Levant, where the Canaanites lived, right? In the land of Canaan.
Yeah.
Probably better pronounced Canaanites, right? But in any case, we know that people traveled from Mesopotamia up the Euphrates River and into down into the Levant, because we have ancient texts engraved in stone that say, hey, they were visitors from Mesopotamia that traveled this way. Very likely they brought their gods with them. So, it's feasible to say, well, the story of Abraham could be true in the sense that people migrated from Mesopotamia to the Eastern Mediterranean, and they likely brought their gods with them. We see that all the time. And I have a book that I would like to recommend to you. So it is called Ancient Mediterranean Civilizations. Okay. And you can Google it, and it's by it's written by a group. Yeah, I can't remember that. Captivating History. It's written by a group called Captivating History. And in that book, you will read all about different civilizations around the Mediterranean, the Carthaginians, the Phoenicians, the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, the Etruscans, the Romans, the Egyptians. They all shared their gods. And as one civilization traded with another, they gave their gods away and they were adopted, right? So Poseidon, for example, Poseidon, the Greek god of the water, he actually started off as a Greek god of the underworld with the ancient Minoans. I mean, it's the oldest god that we know of. He predates Zeus. In any case, what I'm trying to tell you is that, like you said, as there's always something to learn, you might want to dig into what it is you actually believe and figure out if you actually believe it, because there's a lot deeper history. And once you realize, or maybe if you realize like I did, that these gods and religions are just made up by humans, it's likely that we made them up to fit our own narrative, not the other way around. God didn't create us for some higher purpose, but we in fact created them. I don't know. I'm sorry for my rant.
I'm gonna throw in there too real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did you have something you wanted to say, Mattias?
I wanted to say that while we can't exactly go out there and say God is right in front of us, like I'm never going to see him near my gas station. But at that same time, you can't really say that God is not out there. I mean, can you go out into the
okay. Sorry, I can't say unicorns aren't out there either. Like that's disproving something is much harder than proving it. And just because we can't say that something isn't there, doesn't mean that it is true. I mean, it's true that maybe Santa's really good at hiding at the North Pole. Maybe the Tooth Fairy is actually just really sneaky. Maybe she's magical. Maybe she's actually just a spirit. You can't say she's not. And so that's just sort of the lowest level of just, you can't disprove it. And I kind of feel like so far what you've presented as an argument for God is basically vibes, that you look at nature and its vibes tell you that there's a God, and you think that makes it self-evident to others. Good for you that's what your vibes give you. But that's really kind of what this amounts to. It's just some vibes.
Can I respectfully interject here?
Go ahead.
What I wanted to say was first of all, we know Santa and the Tooth Fairy is not real. For me, it was anecdotal evidence because my uncle dressed up as Santa and he tripped over those cords, those little like Christmas cords, and he shit his pants. So. You know what? Say that, right?
Yeah, but you know what? My anecdotal evidence, right, was the stories that I just explained to you, right? Investigating human history, investigating the buildup of civilization, and seeing how gods were created to play a role in legitimizing the rise up of certain civilizations, right? The Carthaginians, when they settled, that's when their gods started representing their cities, right? Same thing happened when different trade routes were established. You know, they found a god to kind of protect them and look over them. I mean, it's ubiquitous, right? It is existing everywhere at once. It's all over the place. And so to say that one God, the one God that you believe in, happens to be the right one, based on the sun and the moon, is really no different than what people thought 5,000-6,000 years ago about the gods that they were coming up with. And so I don't believe that you have presented us any evidence. In fact, you have just kind of done more of the same. You really have struggled to identify, you know, what it is out there that you understand the world to be, and you've kind of just put God on top of it to explain it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Can I get my thoughts out there a little, because you know, I'm trying to like convey this is my first debate, so I'm a little on the edge because I want everybody to not like turn to God, but I want them to at least see my viewpoint. You get what I mean? And so maybe I haven't been conveying those ideas properly, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that, being honest, we never really know if there's a God out there. And I've been switching from atheist to Christian. I got a little lost in the woods there with Scientology. But then, in my opinion, right, Christianity at its core is all about sacrifice. It's all about you never really know what's out there. So maybe for other atheists, they don't get why we turn to Christianity, right? But for me, I get it, because whenever I'm like feeling terrible or something like that, I look forward to Christianity. Christianity is kind of a limit for us. Be honest, if there are tons of bad people out there, right? Tons of bad people out there, but whenever you see somebody turn to Christianity, more often than not, they start doing less bad things. And
well, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. If people become religious, it doesn't mean that they start doing bad things or stop doing bad things. You know, the epidemic of child molestation in churches is running rampant, and it has been. I mean, let's face it, there is probably so much we don't know. But a study from last year showed that between 1950 and the year 2020, 300,000 children were molested in French cathedrals. And how do you justify that? Excuse me. And yeah, did I say 1950 and 2020, 300,000? How do you justify that God is in those churches, that God is looking out for their best interests? I mean, God might make you feel good, but existing as the moral compass and as the all-powerful and all-loving God, you know, it's just doesn't check, man. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't logically follow. So what I think you've given us right now is your reason for believing in God, and that's because it makes you feel good. And that's okay, I guess. But go ahead, Sophia.
Well, so I really need to quote something to you that I just found this week, because it does a great job of countering what you just argued, that people start doing better things. So you know who Frederick Douglass was?
Yeah, the black guy who.
I mean, he was a black dude, prominent abolitionist. He was a slave, and he wrote a lot. So we'll just go with that. Jimmy's having a meltdown, but yes. So Frederick Douglass wrote in when his master converted, which it feels dirty to just say master of another person, which anyway, but when he converted to Christianity, Frederick Douglass really hoped that this would improve his behavior. As this book, I'm just really quoting this a lot, White Too Long, references. So Douglass notes that he initially welcomed the news of Ald, his master's conversion, with some faint hope that these newfound Christian beliefs would lead his master to emancipate him of his fellow slaves, or at least to treat them more humanely. But Douglass was quickly disappointed, finding that the addition of Christian faith into the household actually made conditions worse. For what Ald found in Christianity was not a prick of conscience leading to moderation and benevolence, but rather sturdier support for his cruelty. Douglass saw the perverse dynamic clearly. Prior to his conversion, and this is quoting Frederick Douglass, he relied upon his own depravity to shield and sustain him in his savage barbarity. But after his conversion, he found religious sanction and support for his slaveholding cruelty. And this is not the only example that even this book alone gives of people who convert to Christianity because now the evil they do, they can do by divine mandate. So it just gets 10 times worse. The cover-up of child molestation in the Catholic Church or in the Southern Baptist Convention, or we can list a huge number of churches here. Those were all done to preserve the glory of God, to preserve this idea that people are better within the church. Mm-hmm. And so I don't even think that I need to really question or argue against this idea that Christianity makes people better, because I think if you have your eyes opened, it's so self-evidently nonsense.
Yeah. So, Mattias, I think right there is a good stopping point for us, because you called in to present evidence. I don't think, hold on one sec. I don't think that Sofia or I really buy the evidence that you presented, and we've given our reasons why, but you did raise a point. People are become better versions of themselves when they become Christian, or maybe, when they convert to religion in general. I don't know. But I think you should call back with that. I think you should go and do your research and really present a good argument and call back. Call back anytime. Don't wait for Sofia and I. Call back next week and present your argument for Christianity helping people be better people. But I thought we had a wonderful conversation. Go ahead, Mattias. You sound like you're trying to get something in, and if it's really important, go ahead and present it.
I just want my closing thoughts. A quick rebuttal. I think while you could say that Christianity oppressed a bunch of people, I think you can also look at the good examples of Christianity and look at John Brown, who was very radically opposed to slavery because of the Bible, because he was didn't.
All right. So Mattias, I apologize. I'm going to cut you off here because like I said, I want this to be a conversation for future reference. I want this to be a future conversation. We had one conversation with you regarding evidence. We pivoted to Christianity's impact on people's behavior, and I want to take that second part and have it again later. So what I'm going to do is we're going to move on. I really appreciate you, Mattias, for calling in. I thought Mattias was great, honestly, really respectful, did exactly what he said, wants to respectfully present evidence for God, and he did that. Well, he was respectful. I don't know that he gave evidence for God, but in any case, we're going to hear back from him, hopefully, and I hope to talk to him again soon. So with that, I want to read a super chat. We got $10 from X Million. For the first time, when Sofia is co-hosting, my Talk Heathen submission was not selected. I'll have to promote it myself. God even stole credit for creating evil. For fuck's sake, Isaiah 45:7. Okay, well, hey, that's one way to do it. Look, if you don't get selected in the top 3, if you give us money, we'll read it, honestly. So, Sofia, it looks like you're having a negative impact on this guy being selected. What's going on there?
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I don't know. My vibes were off, I guess.
Yeah.
But that is really funny, and I appreciate it. And I'm glad.
Yeah, that's awesome. X Million is family. He's he or she. I can never remember. Or they. I'm sorry. I probably talked to you before, but I know that I see your name everywhere. You're in the Discord. You're in the comments. You're everywhere. So I appreciate X Million. But I want to, Sofia, I was in the supermarket last week, and I've been in the supermarket every week. And there's always these like Bibles or religious books, in the lobby, where there's a bulletin board and it advertises church services and things like that. So I finally grabbed somebody who worked there, and I'm like, hey, what do I need to do to be able to put something up that I want to put up? And they said, well, you just need to talk to, the customer service, but the line was super long. But I said, well, why do I need to talk to somebody about it? There's all this stuff up here. It's all religious content. What if I just wanted to put my own religious related content? And they said, well, we need to make sure it's not offensive. So I haven't put up my own flyer yet, although I plan on doing it, but that just really is mind boggling. What do they mean? Does somebody get to choose what's offensive religiously and what's not? Is it something that they disagree with? I don't know. But for everybody listening, we have our own flyers from the ACA. It's available on tiny.cc/ACA flyers. And so they're printable flyers. They're advertising for people to call in, hang them up somewhere with permission, and encourage people to call up and defend their faith. They should be engaging with the show. And if you post it anywhere, take a picture of yourself with it, and we might just air it on the show as long as it's tasteful. So email that photo to tv@atheist-community.org, and hopefully we can get you up. But we have the flyers. I post a video every week. Every time before I go on, I post to my own personal TikTok, but Talk Heathen also has its own TikTok. So go ahead and join us there. We have pre-show lives at the ACA TikTok, Atheist Community of Austin, and we also have Talk Heathen TikTok. So look us up there, and feel free to like this video, subscribe to our channel, enable notifications, and comment on your favorite caller. So tell us why Sofia is your favorite host as well.
And it's okay if you say it's because of my boobs. Because that's why I'm my favorite host. So
Well, look.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. That was a terrible thing to say.
Argue with you. This is an unfair advantage because I don't have boobs. But in any case, we're going to move on. We've got some other theist callers that want to talk to us. In conjunction with what we want to talk about today, we have Michael from California, him, who's a theist, says usually, God values everyone equally for different reasons, regardless of gender. So I would like to talk to Michael. And Michael, you're on with Jimmy and Sofia.
Hey,
how can I help you? How can we help you? Excuse me.
Yeah, so I thought that the prompt, as far as in the video, it was pretty interesting, to talk about, and so I wanted to talk about that, and just sort of, pretty much have a conversation about God valuing everyone, and I would say yes on the basis of the way that God sees humanity. The way that God sees humanity is that we have all sinned against him. We have all, in other words, we have all broken God's commands, whether it's lying, whether it's harboring hateful thoughts and whatnot, that are going towards other people, to whether it's stealing, from somebody else. We've all, in one form or fashion, we've all broken God's law and God's command and whatnot. But that still does not deter him from loving everybody with the same love that he exemplified on the cross by sacrificing and shedding his blood on the cross to pay for those sins, to pay the penalty for that.
All right. Well, let's not move into preaching here. We got it. So you think that God treats everybody equally, regardless of gender, even though we have all done some bad things against him. I'm gonna let Sofia take this one. I think she's got some thoughts on this, and Sofia, please.
Yeah. Is it not said that women are saved through childbearing? Is that a verse in the Bible?
Said that women are saved.
Yeah.
I believe it is. Yes, it is.
It is. So when we're talking about God treating everyone equally, the Bible says many things about salvation, but only for women is it supposed to be because I push a human out. That doesn't sound equal to me.
Well, I wouldn't argue that me personally, I wouldn't argue that in and of itself is a means of salvation. In other words,
why does the Bible then? The Bible says it, and so you wouldn't argue it, though. Why not? Because the means of salvation, once again, was the sacrifice that Jesus paid on the cross. And that's not what the Bible says.
In him that we can be saved.
But that's not what the Bible says. It talks about that, but then it also says that women specifically are saved through childbearing. So I don't understand how you just ignore that part. I feel like that's kind of just that. like, I don't really need to give a lot more because I feel like there we already see that there's inequality in the Bible. And I think that this isn't even bringing it in any way into modern day when we look at how women are treated in religious societies. And so I feel like, again, other than you just deciding to ignore that and saying you wouldn't argue it, because of course you wouldn't, because that wouldn't defend your point, but it's just as much a part of the Bible. Like, how do you, I don't know, Jimmy, do you have something to add there? Because I feel like,
I disagree that all genders are treated equally. I don't think that that's true. I also think that, on this point that women are saved through childbearing, I think it speaks to kind of another point. When we talk about original sin, women, I think, were given the far worse punishment. Men don't have to go through anything that women have to go through when you want to talk about the pain of childbearing. I mean, not only the pain, but the death that's involved. And I've talked about this before. But, how do you equate that? How do you consider all genders equal when women clearly are the blame for this sin that you talk about? So I don't know. That's my initial thought. My mind goes directly there. But then there are all these other things, right? I don't think that God values women because there are quotes in the Bible that say that women should submit to their husbands the same way that they should submit to God, because men are the head of the household, just as God is the head of their faith or whatever. I'm misquoting that, but you get my gist. Women, again, I've mentioned this earlier, can be stoned to death for reasons that men would never be stoned to death for. Even Jesus talks about women being in the domestic sphere of the household, right? Saying things like, well, give your wife this bread to knead for you and things like that. So this is a mindset that is consistent throughout the Bible, and I don't see it being equal at all. Now, that's just in the Bible. Let's talk about genders nowadays. Do churches consider women equal to men? I think not. I think there are many religions where women are not allowed to hold the same responsibilities as men, right? In Christianity specifically, the Bible states, women can't be in positions of authority in church. They shouldn't teach. And I think in many Christian sects, that's still the case. Some of them have deviated, but for the most part, they're still being acted out today. Let's talk about transgender people. Do you think that they are being treated fairly by Christian evangelicals today? Absolutely not. And so there's a lot of things that we can point to that I think render this idea of God treating all genders equal just really counterproductive and in contrast to what you're claiming. So
the point that I would make is that in those examples that you gave, that yes, it is that it's true that people, that we don't treat women, men, transgender people, that we don't treat them with respect and with love as they should be treated with respect and love. That's not the argument. The argument is whether or not God treats everybody fairly. How does God view mankind as opposed to me viewing mankind, or as opposed to somebody else, another human being viewing mankind? Our views of one another are differently, and because we, as human beings, we do view people on the basis of race, on the basis of sex, on the basis of religion, on the basis of disability, on the basis of weight. People places value on physical attributes that God does not consider to be worthy of merit, and that God wouldn't say, okay, because you're skinny or because you're fat, you get to be with me. It's not on the basis of physical. It's not on the basis of physical attributes, if you will.
All right, so Michael, you're making a lot of claims right now, and there's just no way to support them. Sophia, did you have something you wanted to comment?
Pretty simple and short, really. For it to be true that God doesn't value us based upon our physical attributes like gender, we'll just go with gender. We'll not address race in the Bible or anything else like that. You'd have to ignore the Bible. You'd have to say that the Bible does not speak for God, because it is made explicit many times that the expectations for me, if I were to follow God, would be extremely different than the expectations for men. And not only is being saved through childbearing part of the Bible, but the expectations for me would be to be quiet, to be a follower. It would be assumed that my ideas are not nearly as important. And I know every exception can be pointed out in the Bible with women. People try to pretend that, like, well, there's a few women mentioned in the New Testament that sort of were part of the church, so that counts. Or Deborah's in the Old Testament. She was a leader. It's fine to have a few exceptions, but when it comes to the stated rules about who I am supposed to be, it absolutely does not treat us differently. Or it absolutely does treat us differently. So either God doesn't view us as being different, and he values men and women equally, and the Bible does not speak for God, because that's the only way that could be true. Or God does see us as being of different value depending upon our gender, and the Bible does speak for him. So basically what you're saying is contradicting the Bible's own report of gender.
Okay.
If you believe the Bible, then you can't believe that's true.
And Michael, I just want to add that you are speaking on behalf of God right now, and you have not given evidence for how you know that that's true, right? So you're telling us the way that God looks at us, and that's different from the way that we look at each other. But you also then need to supply us with proof that you know how God looks at people.
Okay. So how does God view people?
Well, what about what Sofia just said? What about everything that Sofia just said, though? I mean, let's not skip that.
Like what? Like what? Like as far as what specifically? Because she said a lot.
Right. You couldn't grab one thing out of that?
Now are you talking? Okay, so you're talking about women not having positions of authority and whatnot. Like,
I'm talking about how clearly the Bible treats us differently based on gender, and if that is the word of God, then God treats us differently based upon gender.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna take a swing at a left field here, but Michael, I'm actually going to ask you to call us back, because Sofia kind of just made some good points and spoke for a minute, and I don't think that you were paying attention, man. So what I'm going to do is ask you to call back and come in a little bit more focused next time, because we have other callers on the line that have been waiting, and they really want to stay actively engaged and pay attention. So what we are going to do now is pivot. And Michael, thank you for calling. I mean, hey, I wish everybody was as respectful and open as you are, but we just can't waste our time here. It's limited. So what I want to do is move on to John, him from the UK, who wants to talk about what resurrection means. All right. So John, you are on with Jimmy and Sofia. What can we do for you? Hey, John, you're on with Jimmy and Sofia.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Oh, hey,
Hi.
What's going on?
Yeah, speak from across the pond. So thank you for inviting me. I've come on behalf of Richard, who I've had a few conversations with on TikTok, but the character limit stops us from talking properly. So he invited me to join you quite a while ago, to be honest, but I've been so busy I just haven't got my
Great. Great.
Here I am. So
I
mean, that's kind of a headline of really the resurrection thing. That only came about because I heard you talking to some other guy about resurrection. And I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what resurrection actually means. I mean, when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, that wasn't resurrection. That was bringing him back to life. So Jesus didn't come back to life, because if he come back to life, he would have had to die again at some point later on in his life. As we all do. He came to new life. He was resurrected back to his original deified position with the Father. And for a short time before that, he was on earth, speaking to people, eating fish. So I know there are issues there. But he wasn't like back to life as a human being. It's not a case of just coming back to life and walking around again. So I just wanted to make that important point about what the resurrection actually means.
Okay.
It's a regeneration to a completely new kind of existence.
Okay, so what are the implications of that then? Because you're sort of mentioning that it's not just human body anymore. It's this deified, different kind of body. What are the implications of that difference?
Well, the implications are, first of all, that Jesus came from heaven and was, although born of a woman, and therefore had earthly substance in his humanity, his true nature was actually divine, because he went back to the Father. As he said to his disciples, I am returning to my Father to prepare a place for you. And the other implication is that as a Christian, my belief is that I am both simultaneously now and at some point in the future. I have to be very careful with my words here, because we live in such a demythologized age that if I say things like go to heaven, it suggests this sort of odd place somewhere that I'm going to go to when I die. But I more think of it in terms of my whole self, my whole human nature has been resurrected by accepting Christ as the resurrected human, so that I will then rise with him. So it's a kind of a primordial, traditional, sort of mythological, I don't know what sort of adjectives to use really, but
that sounds very vague, and it sounds like almost, well, it's kind of true. I mean, it really doesn't give us any answers. In fact, it departs from what we've been presented in the Bible so much that it leaves it so open for interpretation, because that's what you would need to do in order to make it work, right? We have already seen how, the Bible is wrong in so many ways. Let's take, for example, when Jesus was talking about going out and spreading the word, right? So he said, surely not a generation will pass in Israel before the second coming. He also said that you should go out and try and spread the word to all of the suburbs of Israel, if you will, but you won't have time to reach them all, because the second coming will surely come before you get to finish that. I mean, we've seen that that's not true, right? We know now that Moses probably didn't wander in the desert for 40 years, because it only takes like 6 days to walk across the whole desert. We have technology that allows us
that's kind of the point of the story, though, Jimmy,
to measure that. But hold on, let me just explain. So as we see these stories fall apart, we have to kind of come up with these new inventions, these new descriptions, right? And I think that's what you're doing a little bit. And I don't think that you're the first one. There are a lot of people that reinvent the message of God because it really doesn't comport with reality. I mean, heck, how many sects of Christianity do we have? I don't know. I'm going to throw a wild number. I don't know, 200? I mean, it is probably 200. And then there are, let's not forget, religions that splinter off of each other. I've said it many times. Christianity is not all that different from other religions. You know who else was half human and half divine? Heracles. And he was around, 500 to 700 years prior to Jesus. So there's an influence that could have taken place there, and somebody probably came up with Jesus to explain this demigod lifestyle or this demigod story, because the other one didn't work anymore. And here you are following in those footsteps. That's my take on that. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I'm kind of with C.S. Lewis on this one. This idea of the sort of primordial idea of resurrection, that it's a universal thing that pretty much everybody in the world kind of has a concept of. I mean, even in Hinduism, the idea of the supreme personality of Godhead, the notion that there is something other than ourselves, I think is part of the human psyche. And the reason we have all these global religions is because we have different ways of expressing that. And as a Christian, in a sense, I choose to, obviously because I've been brought up with it, and I don't deny Richard Dawkins'
So
point that,
forgive me. I just want to. I just need to comment on that point. Did you choose Christianity?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You did. So you just said you were brought up with it.
Yeah, what I mean is I was brought up with it, so I know the knowledge of Christianity, but I went away.
So
from it.
were you born to Christian parents in a Christian country?
Yeah, I was.
Well, how convenient. You know, I mean, from the ages of
I was just about
when
to
you were.
that point, Jimmy. Can you if you let me finish what I was going to say?
All right, you're right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I understand Dawkins' point. You know that if you're born in India, you're probably going to be a Hindu. If you're born in Arabia, you're probably going to be a Muslim. If you're born in, Czechoslovakia, you might be an Odinist. If you're born up in Norway, I get that point. I get that he says that. What Dawkins forgets is that people have their own mind when they reach 18 years old. And I think that if you're going to send somebody out to the ocean, you don't let them go out there with nothing. You give them a map. Now, having looked at that map, they can then decide whether they want to follow it or not. They can still reject it. We get people who think the Earth is flat. They've been brought up with the global Earth all their lives.
No.
And suddenly they think it's flat. So
I'm sorry, Michael, but you know what? It's not that easy to reject. It's not that easy. When you're 18, you're still very much dependent on your family. You don't want to be looked at as an outcast. You might need them financially, right? You are probably raised in a society that would consider you different if you decided to be, an atheist or something else. I deal with that. I'm 41 years old, and I deal with being the other in my own family, and it's just at some point I decided I wanted to sever the things that I had been given before I was sent out on the ocean because they didn't make sense to me. But you know what? The one thing that I was given because my parents got it from their parents, and so on and so forth for probably 1,000 years. Who knows? Who knows how far it goes back? But the point is, I looked at these people that were giving me food and security, and I'm sure you've heard this argument. They gave me shelter. They were big. They were old. So I knew that they had done something right in life. Plus, they were giving me everything I needed. What they're saying must be correct, and that's how you end up with this idea that Christianity is the way to go. And I think, did we lose John? Or John, are you still with us? All right, so I think we lost John. I don't know what happened here. I knew he was calling from over the pond. And Sophia, I'm sorry if I took that and kind of bogarted that.
That's okay.
I wanted to get back to you. So sorry. You were you had some thoughts, and please share.
Simply that we can say that we have these independent minds, and to some degree it's true. We do at every age. I've never met a toddler who doesn't seem like an extremely independent person in their own way. But we are formed to such a great degree by the cultures and the mentalities around us that to change our minds about something as vital and organizing in our life as religion, we have to put ourselves into a mindset that our brains genuinely have not learned how to operate within. So even when I was a critical thinker when I was a Christian, I wasn't somehow dumber than I am now, but the perspectives that I had and the arguments that I knew how to make, those were all from within a Christian context. So unless I was exposed to entirely new ways of thinking, I would not have been able to question those with a fully independent mind. And some people may argue that I currently don't have an independent mind because I became an atheist. And so, the devil and all that. But I remember trying so hard to make this all make sense and applying every ounce of logic I could. I read all the C.S. Lewis, just like John was just quoting. And as soon as I was looking at it in a different light, without already believing that this was true, it became untenable. And that was the first time I really looked at it independently. So we can say we have independent minds, but context determines a lot of how we think of things. I'm an American, I'm a woman, I'm white. All of those things inform how I look at the world.
Oh, yeah. Very well said. I have nothing to add to that. I thought that was great. And you know what? I I really liked John's call. So thank you, John, for calling in. Whatever happened there, if you got dropped, I know it was a long distance call. So please call in again, and maybe you'll have a better conversation with somebody else. I don't know. Maybe I was kept stepping on your toes there, but I just want to say that I really did appreciate that. So to all of our callers today, those were great, and to Michael, who I called Matthew several times, I apologize again. And to Michael, who called in, but we had to let him go, give us a call back, and next time maybe pay attention. But what I want to go ahead, Sophia, you wanted to say something?
Oh, no,
I thought you were going to say something.
I just move around a lot. Sorry.
All right, cool. So we had 2 super chats come in. Kelly Laughlin, a member of 2 years, says he's giving $2, one for each of Jimmy's boobs, which is fucked up, man. I'm working on my summer body. All right. So stop, don't draw attention to the parts of my body I'm not so proud of. Thanks, Kelly. I will see you at the after show. And Miranda Rensberger, a member of 2 months, $5. A moderator asked for someone to say boobs in a super chat. Who am I to refuse an instruction from a mod? Miranda, we could always count on you. Thank you so much.
I love what I've started.
Yeah. Hey, this was a blessing in disguise. No,
and if my boobs
kidding.
Get us money, then great.
Yeah. You're like kind of a virtual stripper or something.
I've been called worse.
Yeah. We have a few minutes, like we're over a few minutes, but I want to do something. So our crew puts together this optional content, and I want to go through like just at least a couple of screenshots. So Sophia, we're going to go through screenshot number 2, where I'm going to ask the crew to bring up screenshot number 2 so we can see that. This is you, Sophia. What do you think?
Such a flattering picture. Ooh, I like the quote. Don't make me lesser than a man. I sound so sassy. Let's see. Now we have 50% divorce rates and gender confusion. Patriarchy creates families and society. Feminism destroys both. Okay, so let's talk about happiness within families that have more egalitarian marriages. They're more likely to last, and everyone reports to be happier people. So I don't know. Feminism seems like it shores up marriage there pretty well. Unless you go back to the early stages of second wave feminism, in which women weren't allowed to have bank accounts. So you're right, patriarchy kind of does shore up the family there, but it's just because it traps women and they can't leave. So technical point, I guess, this dude. I also want to mention the idea of gender confusion. So when I think about my own gender, just using myself as an example, I am a woman, but I am considered in many of my traits incredibly masculine. I'm aggressive, I'm loud, I tend to loll about all over the place. So like manspreading is my thing. I also present as hyper feminine a lot of the time physically, but then my personality, some people feel, doesn't match that. That was a huge point of tension within the church of who I was allowed to be and who I wasn't. So gender confusion, I felt a lot more when I was part of the church, when I was under a more patriarchal standpoint, because I was being told that I was, by dictate of God, one way, when in actuality, I simply wasn't. I don't have the character that the Bible ascribes to women. So that was a lot of gender confusion for me. And now that I don't have those bounds, I'm able to fully be myself quite a bit more. And I feel less confused gender-wise. I'm sure that this person is referring to what they would view as probably like trans issues. But I think that we can start with talking about gender way before that and just how it doesn't really fit anyone that well. I'm working as a counselor, and I think you see a lot of men who their basic issues come from being told that they're supposed to be a particular way, that they can't be vulnerable, that they can't need help. And when we're able to break out of patriarchy, those men are able to get the help that they need and even rely on other men and talk about issues in their lives with them. I would argue that patriarchy has caused more gender confusion for them because it's telling them to cut off parts of their humanity than being free from it. So that's my rant about that particular one.
No, that's great. I'm glad that generated such a lively response. And I want to say to this person, feminism destroying the family. I mean, why don't you try being committed to a partner who has equal expectations, equal rights in the household as you? I mean, my wife is very much an equal partner and such a great, outstanding mother, a hard worker. She's a nursing student. She works as a nursing assistant. I mean, she works hard to, she is busting her butt. And honestly, I couldn't feel better. I want to cook dinner, and I couldn't feel better about being in a household, in a family where my wife sets a positive example for what my daughter should be someday, but also how my son should view women. And so I think that I'm very lucky in that respect. I'm going to do one. Go ahead.
I wanted you to do yours, and then I've been wanting to get to screenshot number 8 for some time, for like a
really?
few months.
Okay. Right.
But do your thing first.
Yeah, I'm going to do one for me. So I'm going to go to number 1, and I love this one. I love this one because it says, I was talking about here the story of Abraham forcing his wife's slave Hagar to have sex with him and bear his children. And the person in the comments wrote, this guy accuses Christians of not reading the Bible. He doesn't either, which is why he reads this and says this. He knows nothing. For this screenshot, I literally had the Bible open and read it directly from the Bible. This was the best response I could have to a screenshot. But yeah,
amazing.
Let's move to number 8. Let's go to 8.
Okay. So number 8 says, and I love it so much. I'm glad she takes this attitude. Can't wait for her to tell her kids that Christmas is canceled because she doesn't believe in an imaginary sky daddy. It's when I apparently mocked God by calling him sky daddy. Okay, so first of all, the premise of this comment is that my children, who are now in utero and not yet 2 years old, I will introduce them to the concept of Christmas and then take it away as like a lesson, which is a bizarre premise anyway. And then also, do we know why we have Christmas in the middle of winter? It sure as hell isn't because that's when the Christians decided Jesus was born. It's because that's when Yule was, which was a pagan holiday in Europe. And when people were Christianizing the rest of Europe, they were like, well, we can't get rid of all of their holidays. We have to let them have their imaginary sky daddy holidays. So we're going to just integrate that and have Christmas be part of that. Do you think Santa Claus was in the Bible? Like, there's so many aspects of Christmas and of the scenario this person has in their head that I find fascinating.
I think they inadvertently admitted that Santa Claus is the real sky daddy. Like, that's what I heard from that comment. That's what I heard.
And God just has a naughty or nice list.
At least Let's Santa gives us
gifts. We all
gifts.
Know which one I'm on. We all. Yeah, I love that for so many reasons. Yeah, and honestly, like my son right now is also the only grandchild on both sides, so he doesn't need imaginary sky daddies. He has grandparents.
Sure. Yeah, that was great. I'm glad we got to some of these. Yeah, crew, thank you so much for taking your time to put these together, and definitely keep them coming. Remember, everybody, the prompt for this week: what is God's idea of a perfect woman? Reply in the comments. Tune in at the beginning of next week's show, and we will read the top 3 answers. With that, Sophia, I have to say it's time for some love rings. Who are you throwing your love rings to? I'm sending mine to my wife. Boom.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, my partner, I should say.
I'm gonna say, for me, it's gonna be the people like Michael, who kind of reminded me of myself. They're coming into this, trying to make this all make sense, and I hope the best for you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you again to all of our callers. Remember, Sophia and I are going to jump over to ACA Discord. That's tiny.cc/ACD Discord. That's ACD Discord. And we'll be over there having the after show. And if you do not believe, well, then this is your community, and we appreciate you being here. But if you are a believer, we do not hate you.
We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.